Well, when you recruit them, how do you sell your vision of your culture? I mean, what's the
Who are
first
you
thing?
talking about? The high school guys, the transfers? Who?
All of the above. I mean, how do you? Is there a
It's pretty.
website you
Yeah, it's
follow?
pretty simple. I win. Google me.
Okay, I did. And not only did I Google Curt Cignetti, but I spent days going through 40 years of newspaper articles to try to get my PhD in Cignettiology, why this guy is such a transformative college football coach. And after going through that course, I can tell you that everything that you have been told on a surface level about Curt Cignetti is wrong. Or at the very least, it severely misses the point of his greatness. You've probably heard two things at least about how Curt Cignetti built Indiana. One is that he's a portal king who raided the transfer market to build a roster overnight. Two is that Indiana is buying their way to success. NIL rich program finally flexing its financial muscle. But both of these points are missing something big. And understanding why they are a bit off is the only way to understand what actually happened at Indiana, which is the greatest turnaround in the history of college football. Make sure that you click that subscribe button. It's right down there. And now I'm going to tell you what a lot of the talk about Curt Cignetti has been missing. Let's start with the transfer portal thing, because it's the most misunderstood part of this story. Yes, Cignetti brought a ton of players with him to Indiana from James Madison, where he coached before. D'Angelo Pons, great cornerback, Elijah Surratt, great receiver, Aiden Fisher, Mikael Kamara in the defensive front. But here's what people miss. These aren't really portal pickups the way that we usually think about them. These are guys that Curt Cignetti himself recruited, oftentimes out of high school, while he was at the FCS level. He actually found Surratt, the wide receiver, at a Division II school, St. Francis, Pennsylvania, that recently dropped down to D3. He brought him with him to James Madison, developed him, and then brought him again to Bloomington. This same pattern with these guys repeats across the Indiana roster for 2025, and it's the same thing that Cignetti did in Division II when he was at another Indiana university, Pennsylvania, by the way, and at Elon, and then at James Madison. By the way, Elon, hilarious name for a university. The transfer portal is not usually a place where you find bargains. It's kind of the opposite. It's this open market where everyone's bidding and everyone can see what they're bidding on. But because Cignetti had already identified and developed these players at lower levels, he was bringing proven commodities that other teams hadn't valued correctly. It's not exactly a portal king, although I totally get the label and it's not unfair. It's just ball coaching. It's evaluation, and it's happening in the transfer portal. Here's the other thing that people get wrong about this Indiana situation. Indiana is not at all buying a national championship. Yes, they have money. Their NIL budget for 2025 was, I have been told, somewhere in the mid $20 million range. That's real. That's significant. It's the price of admission. But it's not top end. It's not Ohio State money. It's not Texas money. I don't think it's Oregon money. It's not the money of several teams that Indiana beat. Indiana does have, though, a massive alumni base. They call it the biggest living alumni network in the country. And these people cared about football. They just had been watching a terrible product for many, many decades. But the money was always there. It just needed a reason to show up, which is why a guy like Mark Cuban is now writing checks to Indiana. Cignetti gave these people a reason to pay up, and they responded. But even still, this idea that Indiana is outspending the competition is probably not the story. The story is that Cignetti built a roster so efficiently that regular kind of upper middle class NIL money could let Indiana contend with and even beat teams that had more of it. And that efficiency, that bang for the buck, did not come from nowhere. I think it came from deeper in Curt Cignetti's career. Now, yes, Cignetti did work for one Nick Saban. He was Alabama's recruiting coordinator from 2007 to 2010. He helped build those first Bama national title rosters under Saban, personally landed Mark Ingram, a Heisman Trophy running back. He was Julio Jones's position coach at Alabama. What a couple of players. But here's where the story goes sideways from every other Saban assistant that you've heard of, and why Cignetti isn't really a Saban guy like Kirby Smart or Lane Kiffin, for example. In 2011, Cignetti gets some interest from Kent State to be their head coach, and Nick Saban asks reportedly around the Alabama coaches, who wants to be the coach at Kent State? And Cignetti's hand shoots up. He interviews for the job. He doesn't get it. They hire somebody else. But Cignetti really does want to be a head coach, and so he does something unthinkable. He leaves Alabama, a program that had just recently won a national championship that was on a dynastic run, and takes a job at Indiana University of Pennsylvania, Division II, where his dad once worked. Takes a pay cut from about $250,000 to about $100,000, coach at a school where his family has history. If you think about that, every other coach in America views this sport as like a ladder. You go from small school coordinator to Power 5 position coach to coordinator to head coach. You don't leave the dynasty to go backwards, not just to FCS or the G5, but to Division II. But Curt Cignetti did, and that decision is the key to everything that would happen later on. At IUP, Cignetti ran a football laboratory. In Division II, you don't get 85 scholarships like FBS. You were getting in these days the equivalent of 36 scholarships, and you can split them up however you want. And Cignetti got really obsessive in the weeds about roster construction. Where do you allocate resources when you're Indiana University of Pennsylvania? How do you build depth at premium positions? How do you get the most out of limited dollars, even if they're in scholarship form, not cash? Curt Cignetti's answer was to prioritize line play. He spread partial scholarships strategically. He learned to moneyball a roster. And this was 2011 to 2016, a full decade before the House settlement, before NIL, before every Power 5 program suddenly needed to figure out how to manage a salary cap. Cignetti had already been doing it for 5 years. He also found his coordinators around this time in his life. There's Mike Shanahan, a former Pitt wide receiver, becoming his offensive coordinator, and Bryant Haynes becoming his defensive coordinator, starting as IUP's defensive line coach. Both of these guys stayed with Curt Cignetti for a long, long time, even as we're recording this video today. And I think that when your assistants stay with you through Division II, FCS, Sun Belt, and the Big Ten, even when they're winning and you could get other jobs, that tells you something about culture. That's a green flag. It means you're a good guy to work for. It means people want to be part of your football program. And here's what Cignetti learned from Saban that I think really matters to this whole thing. It's how to evaluate. Cignetti is reportedly obsessed with flexibility, ankle flexibility, knee flexibility, hip flexibility. He likes to call it bendiness. A lot of people just call it bend. This is this kind of athleticism that converts to game situations. It's not just who runs the fastest 40, but it's who moves in a way that will translate to the field. And to this day, even as a Power 5 head coach, Cignetti watches tape on every player. Every player that Indiana is considering goes through this guy. He'll overrule his assistants. He'll reject a player because he doesn't like how he holds his feet in game action. That's a real detail from a really good ESPN story, by the way. Many teams have general managers who are making these calls, but at Indiana, Cignetti just marches to the beat of his own drum. And this isn't new. At Rice in 1988, when he was a 20-something-year-old quarterbacks coach on a 0-win team, Cignetti converted a free safety into a quarterback because he liked how the kid filled rushing lanes hard. At NC State in the 2000s, he found a quarterback you've probably heard of by the name of Russell Wilson, this guy who was choosing between Duke, Ohio, and NC State. Other programs, the big ones, the Blue Bloods, passed, largely because of Russell Wilson's height. But Curt Cignetti saw something different. And that same evaluation edge that helped him find Russ Wilson at NC State is what let him look at FCS players, or heck, even Division II players, and see power conference starters who could win everything. Now, here's the part that you can't replicate, because Cignetti did get lucky, really lucky, with the timing. He arrives at Indiana in 2024, which is the first year of the 12-team playoff. And if he'd arrived 1 year earlier and Indiana was going 11-1 that year, they're playing in a nice bowl game, but they're probably not making the playoff. They don't get the benefit of all that excitement, but they do in 2024. The buzz compounds. Fundraising goes up. Excitement. Momentum. He also comes to Indiana right as the old Big Ten East division is dissolving. Indiana spent years getting destroyed by Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, sometimes even Michigan State. And that was a really tough division, but it's over now because of Big Ten expansion and the league being too big for divisions. He also got to Indiana right when NIL and the House settlement were blowing up. Roster management was changing, and he was perhaps the one head coach in America at this level who had spent 5 years coaching in an environment where managing roster budget was the entire job. And what of those James Madison players, by the way, who came with him? A lot of them didn't just have 1 year of eligibility left so they could come and help out in 2024 and then leave. But guys like Surratt, Pons, Fisher had 2 or more years remaining. Cignetti didn't just get 1 season out of these guys, he got a proper runway. None of that, to me, was skill. That was luck. And anyone who wants to hire Curt Cignetti or the next Curt Cignetti in the future needs to understand sometimes you really can't manufacture timing. So, what's the actual lesson here? I don't think it's go find a portal king. Cignetti's best players are guys that he recruited himself at levels where no one else was watching this closely. It's not outspend your competition because Indiana, they do have a little bit of money, but their budget is great, not elite, not at the absolute top of the sport. They're not that rich. Cignetti just uses his money more efficiently than almost anyone else. I think the real lesson is that this is a sport that rewards coaches who see the game differently, who don't view every job as a rung up a ladder that you just got to climb, and who are willing to build evaluation systems, stick with their staffs for a long time, and learn how to construct a roster where resources are scarce. This is a guy who took a $150,000 pay cut to coach at his dad's old school. His dad, by the way, had been fired from West Virginia while battling cancer. Frank Cignetti Sr. went to IUP and became a Hall of Famer there. 20 consecutive winning seasons, his name is now on the field. Curt Cignetti saw all of that. He learned that you can build something at a place where nobody's really paying attention. And that lesson is what turned Indiana into a juggernaut. So if you're an athletic director wondering, how can I find the next Curt Cignetti? The answer is that you probably can't. But if you're looking for someone who wins at multiple levels, keeps their staff around, evaluates players a little bit differently, and doesn't see a lesser job as being beneath them, start there and then hope that you get lucky. If you liked this video, and I really enjoyed making it for you, I bet you will like the hour-long deep dive subscriber show that we did on the Split Zone Duo podcast with my friend Roger Sherman, who's got his own great channel here. This video is based on that podcast episode. I bet you'd love it. I look forward to seeing you again soon, and make sure you click that subscribe button.